My name is Emily Carter, and my story begins in the busy heart of New York City, America. I grew up in a tall brownstone on the Upper West Side, surrounded by the endless hum of taxis, the glow of neon lights, and the steady rise and fall of ambition in the city that never sleeps. My father, Richard Carter, was not only my parent, but also a towering figure in American business. He founded Carter Innovations long before I was born, a company people across the country knew as a symbol of creativity and success. My mother, Grace, was softer, more reserved, and she passed away when I was only 12, so most of my upbringing fell to my father. I grew up with the taste of ambition in my blood, dinner conversations filled with talk of markets, clients, and deals. But for all his talk, my father never promised me anything. I understood early that, in his world, nothing came for free, not even for his only daughter. After I graduated from college in Boston, 4 years of long winters, hard exams, and endless coffee, I packed my bags and returned to New York. Most people assumed I would walk straight into a corner office at Carter Innovations, but I started as just another employee in the business development department. I knew some colleagues whispered about nepotism, but I was determined to prove everyone wrong. My first desk sat right by the window overlooking 7th Avenue. The city's energy seeped into me every morning as I rode the subway, laptop bag over my shoulder, blending in with the thousands of dreamers who filled Manhattan's streets. Carter Innovations was worth $2 billion when I joined, an impressive number, but my father never seemed satisfied. "We're just getting started," he would tell me, standing in his glass office that overlooked all of Midtown. My team included people like Mark Wilson, a smart but quiet analyst from Chicago, Anna Green, who became my closest friend and confidant, and Michael Harris, a golden boy from Los Angeles, full of charm and confidence, who quickly became my father's favorite. Michael could sell snow in winter, as my father liked to joke, and he had a knack for being in the right place at the right time, always ready to claim credit. Those early years were a blur of hard work. I was determined to learn every part of the business. I spent hours reviewing contracts, analyzing data, and sitting in on sales calls. While others left at 5, I stayed until the office lights dimmed, drinking cold coffee and poring over spreadsheets. The holiday parties, the weekend trips, the dinners out, I missed most of them. My friends outside of work sometimes complained that I disappeared, but I knew what I wanted. When Carter Innovations decided to expand into Chicago, my father asked for volunteers to move and lead a small team. I was the first to raise my hand, even though I had never lived outside New York, in Chicago. The winters were brutal, but the people were honest and the work was challenging. We opened new accounts, faced tough competition, and slowly built our presence in the Midwest. After 2 years, I moved again, this time to Los Angeles, to open our West Coast office. Each city brought new challenges and new lessons. In LA, I learned to navigate not only traffic but also the fast pace of tech deals and media clients. Sometimes, late at night in my small apartment, I wondered if all the sacrifices were worth it. My father never called to check on me unless he wanted a report, but I held on to the belief that if I just worked harder, eventually, he would see what I was worth. Over those 11 years, I helped Carter Innovations launch new products, close massive contracts, and survive more than one financial crisis. I became an expert at finding solutions where others saw dead ends. There were countless nights when I fell asleep at my desk, only to wake up with an idea and scribble notes on my phone. I learned to trust people like Anna, who always had my back, and Mark, who could break down complex problems into simple solutions. Michael, meanwhile, seemed to float above it all, landing the glamorous projects and enjoying my father's praise. I admit there were moments when jealousy crept in, but I always swallowed it and kept going. By my 11th year, Carter Innovations' annual profits had climbed to $950 million, a huge leap from where we started. Our name was everywhere, in trade magazines, on billboards, at conferences in Europe and across America. Yet, inside the office, little had changed. My father still compared me to Michael at every opportunity. "Emily, why don't you network like Michael? Why can't you be more aggressive?" he would say during our meetings. Michael loved to take credit for big wins, and he was always in the right place when it was time for recognition. But behind the scenes, it was often my team fixing the problems, staying late to meet deadlines, and covering for others when they made mistakes. I wish I could say that I didn't care, that the lack of praise didn't hurt, but it did. I longed for my father to look at me the way he looked at Michael, not as a daughter, but as someone truly worthy of respect. Still, I never complained. I believed that hard work would speak louder than any words. I respected my father deeply, and even though he was tough, I still hoped one day he would see how much I had done for him and the company. Through all the highs and lows, the lonely nights and hard-won victories, I kept going. I believed in my heart that if I just kept pushing, one day I would finally be recognized, not only as Richard Carter's daughter, but as Emily Carter, the woman who helped turn Carter Innovations into one of the most successful companies in America. The morning of my promotion felt like the start of a new era. I woke up before sunrise, barely able to sleep the night before. The city outside my apartment was still quiet, a rare thing in New York, and as I watched the early light pour in through my window, I felt a nervous energy that I hadn't felt since my first day at Carter Innovations. I put on my best navy blue suit, the one I had bought years ago for special occasions, and took extra care with my makeup and hair. For a moment, standing in front of my bathroom mirror, I allowed myself to imagine my father's pride, the handshake, maybe even a rare hug. I thought about the possibilities, new responsibilities, greater challenges, a chance to finally lead the company I had given so much to. When I arrived at the Carter Innovations headquarters, the lobby buzzed with the usual activity, but I sensed an extra layer of excitement. People greeted me with nods and smiles, some whispering as I passed by. I wondered if they already knew what the board had decided. For years, I had poured my entire self into this company: late nights, missed birthdays, holidays spent hunched over spreadsheets, and cross-country flights at a moment's notice. Today, I hope all that sacrifice will be recognized. The boardroom was filled with the familiar faces of department heads and senior staff. Anna was there, offering me a reassuring smile. Mark, ever the introvert, gave me a small wave from his seat near the window. And then there was Michael Harris, standing by the side table, pouring himself a cup of coffee. Michael looked as calm and confident as ever, chatting and laughing with some of the managers. My father, Richard Carter, stood at the front of the room, arms crossed, his sharp eyes taking in every detail. For a moment, when our eyes met, I thought I saw a hint of approval, or was it just my hope projecting what I wanted to see? The meeting began with the usual formalities. My father praised the company's success, listed off our record-breaking profits, and thanked the team for their dedication. As he spoke, I couldn't help but glance at the empty chair reserved for the new vice president. The room was warm, the sun casting slanted rays across the glossy table. I tried to steady my breathing, not wanting anyone to see how nervous I was. The moment I had worked 11 years for was finally within reach. My father cleared his throat, bringing the room to silence.
He looked around, then fixed his gaze on Michael Harris.
"It's time to announce the new vice president," he said. My heart pounded in my chest. This person has shown remarkable dedication and drive. They have brought fresh energy and vision to Carter Innovations. I could feel my friend's eyes on me. I braced myself, ready for the announcement I had dreamed of for so long. But then, with a calm, almost casual tone, my father said, "Congratulations, Michael. The company is yours to lead." There was a stunned silence, then a slow wave of applause. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I barely heard the words as my father continued, praising Michael for his hard work and leadership. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. I looked at Anna, who seemed just as shocked, her mouth slightly open. Mark looked down at the table, unable to meet my eyes. But it wasn't just that Michael was given the promotion. What happened next was even more humiliating. My father, with a smile that felt like a knife, said, "Emily, maybe you should take notes from Michael. You should learn what true leadership looks like." Some of the managers laughed awkwardly, not sure if it was a joke or if they were supposed to join in. My cheeks burned with embarrassment. My father didn't stop there. In front of everyone, he said, "You might be better off staying at home, Emily. This business is tough. Maybe you're just not cut out for it." The words stung worse than anything I had ever heard. I had always respected my father, always tried to earn his approval. I had sacrificed so much for this company, and in a single moment he dismissed all my years of hard work. My mind raced. Maybe he was testing me, maybe it was a cruel joke. but the look on his face was stone cold. Then, as if it were nothing, my father announced, "We're letting you go, Emily. The company no longer needs you. You're free to pack your things and leave." The room was silent, all eyes on me. I could feel every stare, every whisper. For a few seconds, I stood frozen, unsure if I could trust my legs to carry me. My whole body shook with anger, hurt, and humiliation, but I refused to let anyone see me cry. I would not give my father or Michael the satisfaction. I straightened my back, lifted my chin, and forced myself to breathe deeply. I gathered what was left of my pride. Slowly, I walked out of the boardroom, ignoring the murmurs that followed me. I passed through the familiar hallways, past the desk where I'd started my first day, past the framed photos of company milestones that I had helped achieve. Each step was heavier than the last, but I refused to let myself look back. In my office, Anna came in quietly and hugged me. I could tell she was holding back tears, but I squeezed her hand and told her, "I'll be okay." I packed my things, my family photo, a potted plant from my mother's garden, a drawer full of notes and sketches, and put them in a cardboard box. As I left the building for the last time, I looked up at the Carter Innovations sign, shining against the New York skyline. I remembered all the nights I had stayed late, watching the city lights flicker on. Now, it all felt like a distant memory. My father's words echoed in my mind, but I refused to let them break me. I walked out onto the street, feeling the cool air on my face. For the first time in years, I didn't have a plan. I didn't know where I was headed next, but I knew one thing for sure. I would not let this betrayal define me. I was more than my father's opinion, more than this job. As the city bustled around me, I realized that I was finally free to write my own story, one that no one could take away from me. And so, with my box of memories and my heart heavy but unbroken, I took my first step into the unknown, ready to find out who I was without Carter Innovations. After leaving New York, I needed distance from the memories. The glittering skyline that had once inspired me now felt cold and unforgiving. I wanted a place to start over, somewhere with open skies and new opportunities. That's how I found myself standing on the front porch of a small house in San Francisco, holding a cardboard box of my belongings and watching the morning fog drift over the hills. The house was nothing like my childhood home in Manhattan, or the sterile apartments I'd rented in Chicago or Los Angeles during work assignments. This house was humble, with creaky wooden floors and a wild, unruly garden, but it felt real, like the first space I could call my own. Moving wasn't easy, not after everything that had happened. I felt lost, heavy with grief and anger. But on my second day in San Francisco, Anna Green arrived, her arms full of groceries and a bottle of California wine. She'd always been the steady one, loyal, practical, fiercely supportive. "You're not doing this alone," she told me, pushing past my protests. A few days later, Jessica Miller flew in from Seattle, bringing her quick wit and sharp business sense. Jessica and I had become friends at a tech conference years earlier. She knew what it meant to start over. Together, the three of us spent the first night in my empty living room, sitting cross-legged on the floor, eating pizza straight from the box and talking about what could come next. We were tired, but something sparked to life in me that night. The city outside my window buzzed with a different energy than New York. It was full of dreamers and risk-takers, people who believed in second chances. "I'm not giving up," I told Anna and Jessica. My voice trembled, but deep down, I meant it. "Everything I've done before I can do again, maybe even better." That was how Novatech Solutions was born. With the small amount I'd saved from my years at Carter Innovations, plus a little from Jessica and Anna, we formed a tiny company in the most basic way possible. A few laptops, a folding table, and endless determination. Our office was my living room, and our staff consisted of the three of us and occasionally my neighbor's cat, who liked to nap on my keyboard. Every dollar counted. I took on freelance consulting jobs to pay the bills, and Anna built our first website herself, learning as she went. Jessica tapped her network in Seattle and San Francisco, searching for clients willing to take a chance on a brand new business led by a woman who just lost everything. The first few months were brutally hard. There were days when our biggest accomplishment was making it through without an argument or panic attack. Some nights, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, haunted by my father's words. But Anna and Jessica wouldn't let me wallow for long. Whenever I started to doubt myself, they reminded me of the countless challenges I'd overcome before. Together we made lists, drew diagrams on napkins, and set deadlines that seemed impossible. We cold emailed dozens of companies and pitched our ideas to anyone who would listen. Sometimes working so late we'd see the sunrise paint the San Francisco skyline pink and gold. Our first client came in a way I never expected. An old contact from Los Angeles, a startup founder named Eric Simmons, reached out, needing help automating his company's operations. The project was small, and the pay was barely enough to cover our next month's rent, but it was a start. We poured ourselves into the work, and when Eric's business doubled its productivity, he recommended us to 2 more startups. Word spread quickly. Silicon Valley was a place where reputations could be built or broken in weeks. Our reputation, it turned out, was for creative problem-solving and relentless commitment. We began to get more calls, then emails from companies in San Jose and Palo Alto. Within a year, we moved out of my living room and into a real office, a tiny space in a converted warehouse downtown, with exposed brick walls and high windows that flooded the room with sunlight. I remember walking into that space on our first day, the smell of paint and new furniture filling the air, and feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: pride. My friends were no longer just my support system, they were my partners, each with a stake in the company's future. Every challenge we faced felt personal. We didn't have investors handing us blank checks. Every dollar was earned. Every contract was a battle. There were setbacks, of course, deals that fell through, competitors who tried to poach our clients, weeks where the future felt uncertain. But each time we fell, we got up stronger. Anna became a brilliant strategist, reading the market better than anyone I knew. Jessica's confidence won us clients I thought were out of our league. And I discovered a voice I never knew I had: the ability to lead with both strength and empathy. By the 3rd year, Novatech solutions had exploded into the headlines. Our client list grew from small Bay Area startups to national retailers and even a few European firms. Journalists called us the most exciting new tech company in America. Venture capitalists sent us emails and invitations, eager to invest. Our annual revenue crossed $3 billion, a number that, even as I type it, still feels unreal. There were times when I would walk through our bustling office and see dozens of engineers, designers, and consultants hard at work, and I'd have to remind myself that it all started in my living room, on a night filled with heartbreak and hope. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had built something truly my own, not for my father, not for anyone else, but for myself and the people who believed in me. Novatech wasn't just a company. It was proof that losing everything can be the beginning of something far greater. My name was no longer just a footnote to my father's legacy. In Silicon Valley, they called me Emily Carter, the new star and innovator, a survivor and a leader in my own right. Standing in my garden in San Francisco, watching the sunlight dance on the flowers, I realized I had finally found what I'd always been searching for: not just success, but freedom. And in that freedom, I discovered the power to build a future brighter than I'd ever dared imagine. It was an ordinary morning in San Francisco when everything changed again. I was sitting in my garden, sipping coffee and reading the paper as the sun rose through the early mist. Most days, I barely glanced at the business section, too many stories about other people's companies, deals, and triumphs. But that day, a familiar name caught my eye: Carter Innovations facing bankruptcy, company to be auctioned. I froze, the cup paused at my lips, my heart hammering in my chest. Carter Innovations. My father's company, my old life. For a long moment, all I could do was stare at the headline, the words swimming on the page. I felt a complicated swirl of emotions: sadness, surprise, anger, and, if I was honest with myself, something like vindication. This was the company I had given 11 years of my life to. The company that had thrown me away so carelessly, only to falter and fall when I was gone. But beneath those first sharp feelings was a deeper one, a quiet determination. I remembered every late night I'd spent at that company, every victory and setback, every lesson I'd learned the hard way. I thought about my father, Richard Carter, and the day he told me I was no longer needed. I had built Novatech solutions from the ground up after that heartbreak. And now my company was 3 times as large as Carter Innovations had ever been. I realized then, in the soft golden morning light, that this was my chance not just for revenge, but for something greater, a final, quiet proof of my worth. I called Anna and Jessica to the kitchen. They were stunned when I read the headline out loud, but they both saw the resolve in my face. Anna smiled softly. "You know what you have to do," she said. Jessica grinned, always up for a challenge. "Let's show them who the real leader is." The auction was set for 2 weeks later in New York. It was a surreal feeling booking my flight. Returning to the city I had once loved and lost, walking through JFK with the knowledge that I was no longer the person I had been all those years ago. This time, I was coming not as an employee or a daughter, but as a woman with power, resources, and a vision all my own. On the day of the auction, I wore a simple black suit, professional but understated. I wanted no drama, no theatrics. I took a car to the Manhattan office building where the auction would take place. As I walked into the tall glass lobby, people looked twice, recognizing me but uncertain how to react. A few of my old colleagues from Carter Innovations were gathered in the hallway, their faces a mixture of anxiety and curiosity. I nodded politely, but my focus was on the future, not the past. Inside, the auction room buzzed with tension. Bankers, lawyers, and potential buyers whispered to each other, calculating what Carter Innovations was worth now that it was a shadow of its former self. My father was nowhere to be seen. Instead, a team of accountants and attorneys represented his interests. As the auction began, I felt strangely calm. All the years of hard work, loss, and rebuilding had prepared me for this. The bidding started low. Some investment firms made half-hearted offers, more interested in breaking the company apart than saving it. When my turn came, I spoke clearly and without hesitation. $750 million. Full acquisition. I'll take on the debts and keep the staff. A hush fell over the room. There was a brief attempt to outbid me, but no one could match the sum or the commitment to keep the company whole. Within an hour it was done. I was the new owner of Carter Innovations, the company that had once been my home and then my heartbreak. After signing the papers, I walked the short distance to the old Carter Innovations building. Memories crashed over me as I passed the marble foyer and took the elevator to the executive floor. I remembered how it felt to come here every morning, ready to prove myself, hungry for my father's approval. Now the hallways were quiet, almost mournful. The energy of the place had faded, replaced by uncertainty and fear. I stepped into the main office, and there he was, Richard Carter. My father sat at his old desk, surrounded by empty boxes and stacks of paperwork. For a moment, neither of us spoke.
He looked older, smaller than I remembered, his shoulders hunched under the weight of defeat.
The silence was thick, filled with all the things we'd never said.
He looked up at me, his face etched with disbelief. "Emily?" he said, as if I were a ghost from his past. I nodded, feeling a calmness settle over me.
"Yes, Dad, I'm the new owner now. Carter Innovations is mine." For a long moment, he just stared, unable to speak. I saw the shock in his eyes, but also something softer, regret, maybe, or even a faint pride. Michael Harris, the man he once chose over me, was nowhere to be seen. In that moment, the balance of our story shifted. I didn't gloat or laugh. I didn't need to. The truth was there for anyone to see. What my father once had, I held in my hands today. "I never wanted it to end this way," my father finally whispered. "I know," I said quietly, "but you taught me to be strong. You taught me to fight for what I believe in. And now I'm going to make sure Carter Innovations survives, not just as your company, but as mine." He nodded, unable to argue. In that moment, the pain and anger between us faded a little, replaced by a strange kind of understanding. Maybe he finally saw me, not just as his daughter, but as the leader I had become. I spent the next few weeks meeting with employees, reassuring them that their jobs were safe, learning what had gone wrong, and setting a new vision for the company. I merged the best of Carter Innovations with Novatech solutions, creating something stronger than either company could have been alone. People said I was bold, but I knew it was just the next step in a journey that had started in heartbreak and ended in hope. Looking back, I realize now that being forced out of my father's company was the greatest gift he ever gave me. It hurt, yes. But it forced me to grow, to fight, and to discover what I was truly capable of. My pain had become my power. And in reclaiming Carter Innovations, I proved to myself and the world that sometimes losing everything is only the beginning. So if you're ever standing at the edge, heartbroken and alone, remember my story. Sometimes what you have today is only a shadow of what you'll build tomorrow if you dare to begin again.